When did you get the news that you won the 2019 BBC World News Komla Dumor Award?
Well, I received the news when I was still back home that I had won the award, and it was really, really the moment of truth for me. I mean, it's the most prestigious award on the African continent. I mean, every journalist would want to really win that award. And for me, it is something that I had dreamt about all my life. And especially when they first opened it up, I think that was in 2015. A Ugandan won it. She's called Nancy Kachungira. I never applied then because I didn't think I was ready. But when I was actually ready, I applied, and I'm so grateful to God that I got this opportunity. The award in itself comes with 3 months training at the BBC, and for me, it's priceless to be at the BBC. We all know that the BBC is the biggest media house in the world, and so the award, I'll have an opportunity to work with the world's best. I have an opportunity to be trained in radio, in television, in online, and in other, media related departments. So I'm super excited and super happy for winning the Komla Dumor Award.
Okay, and on which date did you receive the news?
Well, I am not very good with dates, but it was a week earlier. It was a week earlier that I was called that I won the award.
Okay. So about a week ago?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. When did you start your career in investigative journalism?
So I began my career, I grew up on TV because I started my career as a journalist. I was a freelance reporter for newspapers back home in Uganda, and then I joined radio. I worked on radio for about 2 years as a presenter, and then later on I joined television. Uh, I started working with the Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, which is Uganda's national broadcaster. I worked there for about 3 years. I moved to the NTV. NTV Uganda is part of the Nation Media Group, which is the biggest media group in East Africa. I worked there for 3 years before I moved to NBS TV, which is part of the Next Media Services, also a um, big media conglomerate in East Africa. So I then, I also work with KTN in Nairobi. KTN is part of the Standard Group, which is also a big media company in East Africa. So, but particularly in investigative reporting, I think I developed my desire for investigative journalism when I joined NTV. I did a couple of stories. I think the story that really stood out for me that I did while at NTV was about how Ugandan children were being adopted by people in the US and in the UK and in Europe, but it was literally babies on sale. It was called taken and never returned. So the story was literally detailing how lawyers would go to villages and take pictures uh, of, 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 of children from very poor families, and they put them on their website, and then people wanted to adopt would come to Uganda, and they forge documents. Parents also, because they're excited that their children are going to Europe, they forged documents that their parents died and all that, and yet they didn't know that they would take their children and they would never be brought back. So it was a big story that led to the amendment of the Children's Act back home. There was really a big gray area in understanding legal guardianship, which was this tiny space that many of the lawyers and companies were using to sell Ugandan children on the market. It was a big story that caused a lot of debate back home. It was one of the pieces that I celebrate as a journalist. And then my passion grew. So when I came to NBS, I did several stories, including the dark world of drugs, how cocaine and heroin is trafficked through the Ugandan airport, and how Uganda was losing the fight against drugs. I did a big story again on the deadly gangs of Kampala, which was also a big breakthrough for me. Which of course detailed how like mafias would beat up people, and there were these criminal gangs that would beat up people and just kill them and steal their money. So after I did the story, police started an operation. They arrested some, they killed some, others are in jail, and to some extent, sanity returned on the streets of Kampala. So for me, that's also a part on the back of the role of investigative journalism in advancing accountability and also in playing a part in changing our society. I think the latest story that I did, and it was I did the story with the BBC Africa Eye. It's called Stealing from the Sick. Stealing from the Sick was an expose uh, that showed how Ugandan medical health, some very bad health workers, I want to put it on the record that it's not all health medical workers steal drugs, but some, you know, some cartels. Yeah, I think I should call it a cartel. Some bad health workers actually were selling medicine which was meant to be for the sick. They were selling it on the black market, and it was exported to Congo and to South Sudan and to Burundi. It was a really a big problem that we had as a country. You could go to pharmacies in South Sudan and buy Ugandan drugs in the different pharmacy shops. I mean, you would go to Burundi and buy Ugandan medicine, and yet the people who are supposed to receive this medicine are actually not receiving it. So we took down a 6 month investigation. I think it was not more than because 6 months was we went to the field, but it turned out into close to a year doing this investigation. And along the way, of course, we had challenges, but eventually we put out the story. It was a big story, caused a lot of debate back home. Parliament took time to watch it. They directed the health committee to investigate it. Some people were arrested, and one of the person, of course, committed suicide. But yeah, it had a big impact, and government started operations. They have impounded several trucks crossing the border with medicine. So it feels like it impacts journalism, and I believe that investigative journalism plays a very big role in advancing accountability and in exposing the rot in our system that we need to deal with as a country, as a continent.
Okay, was the person who committed suicide also in the video by BBC Africa Eye?
Yes. So one of the person who was implicated in the video, who was actually selling the drugs, committed suicide the day after the video was aired, and it was, I mean, a big setback. I mean, it did emotionally affect me, but I mean, I was just doing my job, and I remember I was speaking at one of the conferences back home, and someone asked, "Was I happy that um, someone committed suicide because of my story?" I mean, I didn't expect that, but I mean, if you think that you're innocent, then stay around and challenge it in court, or put up a fight that it was wrong. And I think killing himself was something that I least expected. Really.
Was it a man or woman?
He was the man,
Okay, and what was his name?
Richard Oraja.
Okay.
I think as a country, we're still struggling with malaria in Uganda. It is the leading cause of death in Uganda, and it's one of those diseases that countries that live on the tropic, in the tropics, and indeed along the equator experience. And it is a fight that we're still continuing with as a country. I mean, government has really done exceptionally well in trying to manage the situation. I can give you an example. There's a widespread distribution of mosquito nets to the least person at the grassroots level. Government has distributed mosquito nets at length. They have done indoor residue spraying. They do sensitize the public, about malaria and how to avoid it. They have actually also partnered with several international organizations to reduce on the prices of the medicines related to malaria. So we have had a significant progress over the last couple of years, and yet we also still have a long battle, a long journey to continue fighting this. So malaria is really a big problem. I mean, if you go to any health center or any hospital, they will tell you. If you looked at the data, they will tell you that malaria is the one most disease that is affecting many of the people. But I believe that with interventions, as government continues to intensify the interventions, I am optimistic that we will be better and we will defeat this disease.
Okay. But what is the cause of it, actually?
So malaria is caused by female anopheles mosquitoes. We have very many mosquitoes. So I mean, if a mosquito bites you and you get the plasmodium germ, you get a certain amount of plasmodium germ in your blood, then it affects you with malaria. Over the last couple of years, Ugandans have developed an immune system that fights malaria, but sometimes when it gets above the threshold, then sickness kicks in. So malaria is caused by female anopheles mosquitoes.
Okay. How much
Yeah.
is the average price of a drug for malaria in Uganda?
The
In
average,
Yeah.
well, I think the average amount of the average cost of malaria medicines, it really depends. So there are anti-malarials which are the high end, and then there are those the medium end, but also we have the low cost. So I think the average cost of a malaria treatment is about £4. It's about 45 pounds, British pounds, which is about 25,000 Ugandan shillings. It's about £4 to £5.
Okay. I have
And
the
this is quite expensive. This is quite expensive for the people who don't earn. So government gives out this medicine for free to treat Ugandans who go to public health facilities.
Okay. Have the charges against you and your team been dropped after the uh, Africa Eye video was published online?
Well, we were supposed to report to police literally every after 2 weeks. So the police would tell us, come back on this date. As we continued with the charges after the arrest, we reported as we were informed, but the police has never come back to us on to um, when we will be going back. So I think that either the cases were dropped or the police lost interest in the case. So we haven't yet gone back to the police.
Okay. So in the video, your team was arrested by the military intelligence. So tell me about how that all transpired.
So we came back from the operations with the team, and they were really tired. I think we arrived in Kampala at about 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and everyone was tired. So I told them, guys, I got this. So I told them I have some space where we can keep the medicines before we can take it to the health monitoring unit the next day. So I told them to go and rest, and I put the medicines at my home so that we take them to government facilities the next day. Thing is that next day we had another operation to do, which was the last operation, which of course was nipped in the bud by the security forces. So they arrested the team. The team said they were journalists, and then the team that I was arrested was brought to my home, and that's the home and take the drugs and also arrest my wife. In that time, I wasn't at home, so I wasn't arrested. So literally, all the team members were taken in except me, and I had to tell my story before I would hand myself in.
What are the challenges you initially faced in your career?
Investigative journalism is not for the faint-hearted. I mean, ask any investigative reporter across the world, and they'll tell you that they take a lot of risks to do what they do. And because you're exposing a cartel or a mafia or government, so it's quite risky to go into investigative journalism. But someone has got to do some of those stories. So I think the first challenge that we face is the threat and arrest and the death of our colleagues. There are very many African journalists who have been killed, and not only in Africa but also beyond. There are international reporters that have been killed who have been doing investigative reporting. So I think that it's deadly, it's dangerous, it's risky, but certainly it has someone has got to do it. Someone has got to do it. Someone has got to tell that story. So for me, I think the first challenge is that threats on investigative reporters, which of course I've gone through personally. I mean, back home, people are following you. You have the state of paranoia. You're in a state of paranoia. You can't. You asking who is looking at me. Why is such and such a person walking next to me? You start questioning everything. So you have to be extra careful with your life. So that's the biggest challenge. But I also think, as I told you, that financial challenges also stand as bottlenecks, because sometimes you have projects which you want to execute and you don't have money, and your local media house that you're working with does not have the money to support you to execute such an investigative report.
Okay.
But it goes without saying that I think as the world increasingly gets interested in investigative reporting, I know that some organizations have actually put up some money and some donations and grants to apply for if you have an investigative story to work on. So the future is really bright for investigative journalism in Africa.
Okay. So at what age did you start with your career?
Like I told you, I'm not very good with ages, but I think I began my television career at 23. 23,
Okay.
yes, about 23, 24 years. That's when I started my television career. So I've grown up on TV.
Okay. And did you follow a course in journalism?
Yeah, of course, certainly. I have a master's degree in journalism and communication. I have a postgraduate diploma in investigative journalism. I have several certificates and that I've got along the way from the African Journalism Institute in Cairo. I
Okay.
mean, yes, so I have done some background in journalism.
Okay. What advice would you give to those who want to become a journalist?
I think journalism is a noble profession. It's a noble cause where you should be motivated to tell stories. Beyond that, I think, for example, a journalism in Africa doesn't pay so well. So you cannot join journalism for money because it doesn't pay in Africa. I don't know
Mm.
elsewhere in Europe and in the US, but in Africa, journalism is not really about money. It's about that passion to tell stories.
Mm.
It's a noble cause. It is our contribution to changing society. So if you want to be part of the change that Africa needs, then you've got to play your role as a journalist. So
Mm.
we welcome the young reporters from university, the because they have the energies, they're the future of Africa's journalism. So I think I would want to encourage them that the sky is the limit and they should push themselves to the limit for them to be able to excel in journalism.
Okay, you said that journalism in Africa doesn't really pay.
Yeah, it's not like one of those jobs that are high paying. Like maybe accounting or like human resource or like engineering and all those medicine and all that. If you ask journalists across the African continent, they'll tell you that the amount of money that media houses in Africa pay is a little bit lower. And so you're driven more by the passion to do what you do rather than the money.
But how come it's not that high?
Well, I don't know, because maybe it's a growing media industry and the competition hasn't gone so high, because when there's competition, then the amount increases. I think also because it's a young industry. So in terms of advertising, where does the money come from to pay the reporters? I mean, media houses will tell you want to grow and we're still struggling financially. So we are in initial stages, So it's quite a topic to get interested in, journalism in Africa and how they pay their reporters and stuff. So certainly it's a big challenge because we've lost very many media personalities in Africa who have left the profession to go and join, PR and communication, to go and be directors at different institutes like director communications or corporate affairs. And they were really big names in journalism, but because, they wanted money, many of them have left journalism and they're now practicing PR and communications. Because anyway, so I think for us to really ground ourselves in journalism, we need to pay attention to the welfare of journalists themselves, the money that we pay them, the motivation, so that we can build a strong foundation that is deeply rooted in professionalism. But if we don't do that, then I can assure you that we are about to lose many more in reporters, good reporters, and good media personalities into into business, into PR, into communications, into other fields.